Now, we have thoroughly explored the worlds of Super Mario and Zelda to bust any myths we found. However, now we will do the same for Pokémon. And man oh man, there's a lot we will cover today. For example, can a Nugget make a Pokémon shiny when it evolves? What happens if you lose all your money? And is there a hidden picture of a cat in Pokémon Stadium? Well, let's find out. Now let's start off with something simple that all of us are more than familiar with. An age-old trick that we have all tried. I mean, I even did this for years as a kid in multiple different Pokémon games, all in the hopes of success. I'm talking about the trick of mashing or holding down certain buttons to increase the chances of catching a Pokémon with a Pokéball. This is something we have all done. Even all my friends did this back in the day, and everyone had a different strategy. I used to spam the A button when the ball was shaking around. But does any of this work? Was this ever a thing in a Pokémon game? Well, no. This was never a thing in any of the Pokémon games. Not the old titles or new ones. So this claim is false, and man oh man did we waste a lot of time as well as muscle power back in the day. Now, while Pokémon was originally made for children, it still has a lot of dark and depressing elements. I mean, death is something that has been covered since the very beginning, with Lavender Town being a great example of this. And of course, there are a billion crazy claims and myths surrounding this stuff. And one of those involves the Marowak you encounter in the first game. When making your way through the Pokémon Tower in Lavender Town, you will encounter the ghost of a Marowak that you need to fight. But a lot of people wanted to catch this ghost, and some online sources even claimed that this was possible somehow, usually by using a specific Pokeball or a certain attack before you try to catch it. But can this ghost really be captured? Well, no. You are supposed to defeat it in order to put his spirit to rest, and so you can't capture it, which means that this claim is 100% false. Now, when the first Pokémon game came out, it was an instant hit across the globe. But of course, due to this, as well as the lack of info out there, many different rumors popped up. One of those is about how the game ends, because for many years there was a claim out there that in the end, you would have to fight Professor Oak as a last test of strength. But is this really in the game? Well, surprisingly enough, it is. And originally, it was going to be part of the game, but the fight was cut. And using a combination of glitches, you can actually trigger this fight. And man oh man, he has a pretty strong team. It consists of a level 66 Tauros, a level 67 Exeggutor, a level 68 Arcanine, a level 70 Gyarados, and one of the Kanto first partner Pokemon at level 69.
Nice.
This puts him on a similar level to your rival at the end of the game, and so many assumed that you would fight him after. But he was cut. However, you can still take him on if you want to, so I guess I will label this claim as plausible. Some myths, claims, and rumors never really died down. Even decades later, they are still going around, even in more modern titles. And one of those involves Magikarp, because many people online claim that his splash attack isn't actually a waste of time. If you use this attack enough times, or when fighting a specific Pokemon like a Tentacool, then this attack can be an instant kill. Meanwhile, others said that if you use this attack 100 times, then Magikarp will be able to learn Surf, no matter where you are in the game at that point. But are any of these odd claims true at all? Does Magikarp have some hidden powers? Or none at all? Well, no. He can't do any of this. Magikarp is a pretty useless Pokemon overall, until it evolves into its much more powerful Gyarados form. So yeah, all of these claims are false. And to be honest, I have no idea where they originally came from, and why they haven't died down yet. Back in the good old days, training Pokémon was a bit of a hassle. You needed to do it in person, and a link cable was required to pull it off. Now, of course, people started to experiment with this process, which led to many lost Pokémon. But some succeeded and claimed that they were able to clone a Pokémon this way. However, is this really true? Well, yes, it was a very popular trick in the first generation of Pokémon games. But how did it work? Well, you had to interrupt the trading process. The Game Boy link cables for the Game Boy are unable to send and receive data simultaneously. So one game cartridge first sends its traded Pokemon's data while the other receives it, and then vice versa for the second traded Pokemon. But interrupting the trade after one Pokemon was sent and the other wasn't causes the first Pokemon to be present on both games, and the second one isn't present on either, essentially making two of the same Pokemon while making the other disappear. Now, this can happen by accident as well if the connectors of the cable are dirty battery or if it's damaged. And of course, all of this can also go horribly wrong and corrupt your save file. Well, in Gen 1 at least. In later titles, this problem was fixed. However, it is clear that this trick works, even in later generations. But you gotta be a bit careful when doing this. Now, so far we've looked at a lot of stuff from the older games. However, of course, there are also rumors about the more modern titles. And this next one isn't even in a Pokémon game, but still it is Pokémon related, because as we all know, this franchise is also present in the Super Smash Bros. Series. And in these games, there's one map that is very well known, Pokémon Stadium. And I had read online that there's a little secret in the Pokémon Stadium 2 map when it's in ice mode. Apparently you can find a picture of a real cat inside of this little shack. But is it really there? Well, I decided to check it out using the NoClip website, which allows you to look at maps in loads of games. And as you can see, there's actually a picture of a cat inside of it. Now, we don't know why it's there, but many folks believe that it's the cat of the game's creator, Sakurai. However, this has never been confirmed. So while it is real, we have no idea why this was added. It must have been for fun, right? One little detail that I always loved about the Pokémon games is the Nintendo consoles you would find in your room at the start of the game. This is a tradition in the Pokémon titles. However, I had heard that in the most recent game, Scarlet and Violet, they added an extra detail to the Nintendo Switch seen in the game. It is said that the colors of the Joy-Cons reflect the ones you use while playing the game. But is this true? Because they never did this in the older titles. Well, I decided to check it out. And yeah, as you can see, the Joy-Cons do change. And this is also a thing in older Pokémon titles for the Switch, like Sword and Shield. So I bet that in future titles, this little Easter egg will make a return as well. In basically every Pokémon game, you will hunt down a number of legendary Pokémon so you can add them to your collection. And usually finding or summoning them is quite difficult, because often it's not a straightforward process. Due to this, many claims popped up about ways to find certain legendary Pokémon, with some being true and others false. And one that I came across that sounded fake was catching Ho-Oh in Pokémon Black and White 2. All you need to do is go to Celestial Tower after collecting a special feather and ring the bell. Meanwhile, some others said that he would just appear there at some point. But is this really true? Well, after doing some research online, I did find a bunch of videos showing this off, but all of them seem to be fake. Ho-Oh will never spawn at this tower, and as far as I could find, you cannot catch this legendary Pokemon in this game. You'll have to import it from another DS title, or trade with someone who has a Ho-Oh on their own file. And the only way you could obtain one normally in the Unova games was in the original Black and White title, either through the Dream World or maybe an event. So yeah, this claim is false. Now, as you can imagine, not all the myths out there in the wide world make sense, and this next one is a bit crazy to say the least. It all started back in April of 1999, when Expert Gamer magazine displayed an article allegedly detailing a method to get the Pokémon Dragonite to evolve into Yoshi from the Mario series. According to the method, you needed two people, one with Pokémon Red and one with Pokémon Blue. Both players would have to complete the entire game and collect all 150 Pokémon. As soon as that was ready, you had to trade. The red player would have to trade a Dratini to the blue player, who would then evolve it all the way up to a Dragonite and then trade it back. The red player would then have to go to the basement of the unknown dungeon, surf to the location in which Mewtwo can be found, and use a Firestone to evolve Dragonite into Yoshi. But is this in any way real? Well, of course not. All of this was an elaborate April Fool's joke from this magazine. So sadly enough, you can't use Mario's best friend in a Pokémon battle. Not all the claims we will cover today are grand. Some are rather simple and small because I like to cover a mix of things. And this next one is just like that. Apparently, Miss Ryford from Pokémon Scarlet and Violet is covered in accessories that reference legendary Pokémon. Now, I had never fully analyzed her outfit, but after doing so, I could see exactly what people meant. She wears a necklace resembling Articuno, a belt buckle resembling Lunala, a hairpin with Marshadow's face, and a bracelet resembling the shelf Tapu Koko. So she's covered in them from head to toe, which is pretty cool, and I wish Nintendo would actually sell these accessories for real. I know they sell jewelry at Pokémon centers, but not these as far as I know. Normally it makes sense which moves certain Pokemon can learn, for example a rock type being able to use strength, but at times it also doesn't make sense, and I had heard that you can actually teach Pikachu Surf in the Gen 1 games. However, when you try this, it doesn't work at all. So is this even possible, or is it just a lie? Well, when I started looking into this, I figured out that it was a bit complicated. There is a way to obtain a Pikachu with Surf, but it isn't easy. In total, there are 4 ways of getting your hands on one. First, by using glitches. Second, a competition that Nintendo held back in the day. Third, by beating a challenge in the first Pokémon Stadium game and transferring Pikachu over. Or fourth and last, you use something like a Game Genie, which is the same as using cheats. But if you were able to do this, you could finally get a surfing Pikachu that actually uses a surfboard in-game as well. And it even unlocked a minigame in Pokémon Yellow. So as you can see, getting a Pikachu with Surf is possible. And even in later games, you could get your hands on one. Although overall, it was still pretty difficult to obtain this special Pokémon. Now I will admit, I haven't been too big on Pokémon for a long time because at some point the game became quite stale and it felt like Game Freak was cutting corners. And so the last game I truly played to death was Pokémon Diamond and Pearl. But apparently I missed something during my time with this game. As we all know, the DS keeps track of time. So the game knows exactly when it's your birthday. And apparently your rival, Dawn or Lucas, will congratulate you on the day. So is this a thing? Well, as you can see right here, they do exactly that, which is actually pretty sweet of them. But I kind of already expected this one to be true. Sometimes there are little secrets in the Pokemon games that you can only see if you pay attention, and apparently there's something like that in Pokemon Sun and Moon. If you go to the Shady house scene in the game, you can actually see a little thief appear from the chimney, a Delibird to be specific. However, is this really in the game? Well yes, as you can see here, this is a thing, but it rarely happens, and you gotta keep an eye out to spot the Pokemon. Now he probably comes here to take any loot from this old abandoned building, but aside from that, he does very little. And you can't capture this Pokemon as far as I know. So while it is a fun Easter egg, this is not a way to get your hands on a Delibird. Throughout my years of playing Pokemon games, there has been one problem that I never really encountered: losing too often. I mean, as we all know, the Pokemon games aren't that tough, and so most of us would win any battle we encountered, except for a gym here and there. And so you would always have enough cash. But what actually happens if you run out of money due to losing too often? Well, I had no idea, but I did see some claims online that it would lead to a straight game over, forcing you to start a new save file. But does that really happen? Well, after some experimenting as well as research, because man oh man, there are so many titles, I found out what happens. You don't get a game over or lose your save file. Instead, you're transported back to a Poké Center and your team is brought back to full health. And that's all. So really, the game goes on like normal, but you're broke. So buying potions or revives is not gonna happen. But luckily enough, the Poké Center will still help you out. Sometimes I come across claims that are just too good to be true, myths that would change the world if they are real, and this next one is just like that. Because I saw folks online claim that if a Pokemon holds a Nugget when evolving, it will become shiny. These are special Pokemon that have a different look compared to the normal ones. Mostly their color is different, but finding these can be hard because there's a low chance you will encounter one in the wild. I mean, people spend hours on finding them. However, can you also create them by using a Nugget? Well, I decided to give this a shot by making a Pokemon that holds it evolve, because apparently this will turn them into a shiny. But in the end, it does nothing at all. Even when I did research online about other Pokemon titles, I saw that it isn't a thing in any of the games. So sadly enough, this claim isn't true, and a Nugget is not going to transform any Pokemon into a shiny. Now those were all the myths we had for this video, but be sure to leave your ideas in the comments below if you want to be featured in a video. And if you're a member, then you're at the top of my list, just like Julian Lanning. Aside from that, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe so you won't miss the next video.